Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, how are we getting on? So in today's video we are going over 10 tips to give you a good strong start in Fallout 76, particularly with the Wastelanders update. If you've just picked the game up to check out the new update, then this should be very handy for you, and the new update is absolutely awesome, by the way, very much enjoying it. If you're jumping back in after a while away from the game, you should find a few things in here that help you out as well. And even if you're just starting a new character to play through the update with, you should find this very useful as well. Cover a lot of tips that are useful for the game in general and some specific to Wastelanders, so let's jump in and take a look, shall we? So, the Wastelanders update's been out for a couple of days, having a great time playing. It's really cool. It's changed a huge amount of things beyond just the obvious introduction of NPCs and dialogue and new quests and locations, things like that. It's also fundamentally changed the start of the game as well, which is pretty interesting and should mean that there's a few things in here that will be very useful even if you've been playing all the time since beta. There'll be a few changes that we'll be able to help you work your way through today. So let's look at tip number 1, shall we? So tip number 1 is one that's been around since the beginning of the game and still applies very strongly, which is make sure you explore Vault 76 before you leave. You won't be able to get back in here, so anything you miss you won't be able to pick up again. Obviously, as you head through, you get given a few useful supplies, a few bits and pieces, but if you head into some of the side rooms, you get a little bit of lore, a little bit of information about what life inside Vault 76 was like in the years before you leave, and you can also find out a little bit more about the Overseer's mission, which is still part of the story and still very significant to Wastelanders as well. So you can get a little bit of background, a little bit more information on what's going on with that before you leave the vault. It's well worth checking out, so a good bit of information there. So, tip number 2, when you head out of the vault, turn right and head along the veranda patio area just outside the vault door, and you'll find a corpse. And on that corpse you should find a pipe pistol. It'll be the first place you'll pick up a weapon just outside of the vault. Your other option is to go left, head down the hill and talk to Lacey, who is one of the new Wastelanders characters who will set you off on your journey. We'll do that in just a moment. She'll also give you a weapon if you need one. But if you follow on past this corpse, head just down the hill a little bit, you'll find a load of destroyed vehicles and the like, and a few liberators hanging around. So if you dodge those guys or take them out, you'll probably run out of ammunition, but you can just whack them a few times. That worked quite well. And down there you'll find a few boxes with grenades in them, possibly, if you're very lucky, a pipe revolver and a good bit of ammo for it. We did quite well when I had a little run around. There's also a corpse down the bottom area, just beside a bus who looks to be a former police officer, who usually has a couple of weapons on him as well, so that's worth raiding. And you can grab a little bit of supplies and the first bit of scrap as well, so well worth doing before you set out on your journey. So, next couple of tips before we head on any further are a little more general. The first one, tip number 3, is to take your time. It's been something I've been saying since the beginning of the game, and it still applies now. There's a lot to find and a lot to explore in 76. There's lots of lore, there's lots of little bits of detail, and there's cool things you might otherwise miss if you just rush through. The other side of it is that once you've got your character fully built and leveled and everything's all geared out, a lot of the challenge disappears from combat. Not all of it. There's certainly a few things that will still give you trouble, but if you want to have a challenge and feel like you have to sort of work for your achievements, then taking your time, sort of exploring, building things up a little at a time is definitely a better way to go. Personally, I think you'll have more fun that way. If you do want to power level, we'll have a couple of bonus tips at the end that will help you do that, but I would personally say don't go down that road. Maybe if you've been playing for a while, but for a first character or a first look at Wastelanders, I'd take your time. So tip number 4 is to do with character building. It is very helpful to have an idea of what sort of character you want to play, particularly with the sort of combat style you want and perhaps the role-playing options you want to choose as well. Particularly with Wastelanders, there is a lot more opportunity to decide what sort of a person you want to be, what sort of a way you want to play. So it's worth having at least some idea of that before you jump into the game, particularly as you get your first opportunity to start talking to people right outside the vault. So probably good to decide that, but at least on some level before you set off. But beyond that, what sort of combat style are you going to go for? That should be one of your first choices when you're deciding what sort of build to go for. There's a lot of options. A lot of people will say go for a melee build or particularly a bloodied build because they wind up very powerful, and if you want to run around and one-shot things, that's an effective way of doing it. Personally, not a big fan myself, but it's an option. But some useful general pointers. You're going to go down the automatic weapons route. Bear in mind you're going to go through an absolute stack of ammunition very quickly, and you're going to be scrounging for that a lot. So if you want to do that, you can, but personally I think a single shot style of weaponry or melee weaponry is a little more practical personally. but you've got a few options. Other than your primary weapon choice, you also need to look at sort of secondary attributes. Most of your weapons will be focused on one, maybe two special attributes, so you may want to max them out. You don't have to. But you will also be left with a few extra special points to allocate beyond that will allow you to build up some secondary skills. This is also useful for your role-playing as well, because as you go into the conversations, you'll find special checks that allow you to pass different dialogue options based on your character's skill set. There's also an interesting little side to that if you are too good at a particular skill, you can find that you are over-specced into that particular skill and can't pass the check for that reason. Less common, but it does occur. In a general sense, for your primary weapons, if you're going to go down the pistol road or the stealth road, then your main stat will be agility. Most of the perks under that particular special point are geared towards those weapons. For rifles, be that automatic or single-shot snipers, that sort of thing, perception's the way to go. It's also the way to go if you want to be a VATS-heavy build. Melee weapons, obviously, strength is the way to go. If you're looking at shotguns, it's a mixture of perception and strength. There's mostly perception skills, but there's a couple of strength perks as well that are very, very handy for shotguns. For heavy guns, it's almost all on strength, though you will find a couple of others are handy scattered around as well. So for your secondary skills, I would strongly recommend, no matter what build you're doing, put at least 5 points into intelligence. Reason for that being, your gunsmith perk is under there, and to max that out and therefore be able to craft the best upgrades for your weapons, and same goes for melee weapons and for armor as well, you will need at least 5 points into intelligence. You can, if you're playing with other people, get them to help you out if they've got more of an intelligence build than you, but you are restricting yourself if you don't do that. If you don't want to go big on intelligence, then 5 should be enough to cover it, but you can also put more points in there because there are a range of other skills that are good to have as well. So endurance is quite handy to toughen yourself up. There's a few useful perks under there that are worth looking into. Fireproof is particularly handy. The radiation resistance perks, stuff like that. So there's also a couple that will slow down the rate at which you consume water and food, which just makes life a little bit easier, so maybe worth a look. You'll also find some very fun and useful perks under the luck tree. A couple of my favourites would be Farmer, which allows you to get more chems out of any chem boxes or first aid boxes, anything like that. Very, very useful to have a decent supply of stim packs, and if you wind up with too many, you can always sell them on, and it's a good way to make caps. Good steady income. You'll also find the Class Freak and Starch Genes perks underneath the luck tree. There's, I think, about 4 points worth of perks there, and they are very much worth having, because if you intend to be mutated, which is quite handy, particularly late game, gives you a few extra powers that are useful. Starch Genes will prevent your mutations from being cleared by Radaway, so you'll be able to still take that and not lose your mutations. Class Freak will also reduce the negative sides of any mutations you choose to take, so that's very, very handy to have as well. Most of them do have a secondary negative aspect to them, so that's worth bearing in mind. If you do want to take on a new mutation, though, make sure you take Starch Genes off before you take the serum or get the mutation, because if you have it on, you will not be able to mutate. And also remember to put it back on afterwards, because you can then lose your hard work if you don't, so bear it in mind. And Charisma is particularly useful if you are going to be playing with other people. You are able to share your perks with different players if you go down that road. It has a couple of useful perks for single-player characters as well, people who are not playing in groups. As Lone Wanderer has a few points under that is very, very handy to have. Travel Agent is a particular favourite of mine. Anytime you fast travel, you'll find it has a cap cost, but if you've got Travel Agent equipped, that's another Charisma perk, you'll find that you are spending a third less caps each time you travel, which does add up over time. It's not a big change, but it's a nice to have, because it can be a little galling sometimes to fast travel across and find there's a big bill for it. One of the other things that comes with Wastelanders, obviously, in the conversation side of things, there's quite a lot of charisma checks. There are a lot on other perks as well, so various options are available, but charisma crops up quite a lot, so if you go down that road and want to be a persuasive character, that's also something to think about with that particular perk. So just a few things to bear in mind with creating the kind of build you want to go for, the sort of character you want to play there. So, tip number 5, something else you should absolutely do before you get off the plateau outside Vault 76, and that is using the Tag for Search feature. If you bring up your Pip-Boy, go over to the Items and Junk tab on the Pip-Boy, down at the bottom you'll see a little option that says Component View. If you select that, it'll bring up a list of all the available components that you can get by breaking down junk. Now, with a lot of junk items, you'll find plenty of them. You won't have any difficulty in making sure you've got a decent supply. But for certain things that are slightly rarer and are very, very useful, particularly for upgrading weapons and armor, and some of them for camp building as well, it's a good idea to tag them early. So you'll see at the bottom an option that says tag for search, and as you go down the list, you get a little magnifying glass icon that appears next to them. That means anytime you look at an item that contains that particular resource, you'll see the little magnifying glass icon, and you know you need to pick it up. With some of these things, as I say, they're quite rare, so to make sure you've got enough, it's worth to tag them early and make sure you're picking them up as you go. So, some of the key things on that list are adhesive, aluminium, ballistic fiber, circuitry, gears, lead, particularly if you're going to be using automatic weapons, you're going to be making a lot of bullets. Nuclear material, plastic is always very handy. Screws and springs are also very handy as well. And as I say, they're not always easy to find, and you will always need a good few of them, so worth tagging those early on. As a side point, I will also be doing a set of guides before too long about the best places to go and find any particular material you might need for crafting, particularly surrounding camp building, but also in terms of weapons and anything else you might want to craft. That guide series will be coming up fairly soon, and I'm going to do individual videos on each particular item, but there are certain items that don't really have a single defined location to go and find, and most of those are the ones that I've just listed, so well worth making sure you've tagged those early and then you're not struggling later on. Tip number 6 has to do with the survival mechanics in the game. I'm not 100% sure, but I have a sneaking suspicion that with Wastelanders they've gotten a little more high pressure, shall we say. I think the rate at which water and food are consumed have increased. I can't really confirm this for sure, but it does feel that way to me, and I've been playing the game quite a while. It's a change I have noticed. So food and water, very, very important. If you let yourself get too hungry or too thirsty, you will find you lose a lot of action points, and basically you won't be able to run as fast, you won't be able to use VATs as much, and it significantly weakens your character, so you need to keep yourself fed and watered. So the simplest way to do that is to make sure at your camp you build a water purifier. Once you progress through the main story, the original main story I should say, the Scorched Plague questline following the Overseer, you'll quite quickly pick up water purifiers and a few other useful plans and stuff as well. It's something to bear in mind and a very good reason for pursuing that line. If you head to the Wayward, which you will be doing very, very early on, it's now a key point in the beginning of every character's journey. Just outside there is 3 or 4 rows of corn. It's going to be a very popular place for people to harvest, so you might have a hard time getting much out of it, but it's an option. Another option is when you get to Morgantown Airport, just behind the building, towards the left-hand end as you leave the terminal, you'll find a little farm area at the edge of the tarmac there. That's also got a load more crops. Another good place to go is Cobbleton Farm. That is sort of northwest of Morgantown Airport, just on the edge of the Toxic Valley. That's also got a nice selection of available plants, which are also useful if you want to craft adhesive later on. If you grab a few of those, plant a few at your camp, particularly corn, and razor grain is another good option as well, you'll find combining that with dirty water that you can get from any water source around, boil that up to make boiled water, and you'll be able to create soup. Particularly corn soup and razor grain soup, they have a couple of useful secondary attributes to them, but primarily they clear off both food and water requirements at the same time, so it's one item you can carry, it's less inventory space used up, and it's a very, very effective way of doing it. If you've got a small supply of that at your camp, you can keep yourself stocked with food all the time, and you won't have a problem. Another very handy thing to make sure you're carrying around, keep an eye out for, is disease cures and antibiotics. Diseases are not a big deal, they do give you a little bit of a debuff when you pick one up. So it's very handy to clear them, and they also add extra icons on flashing red on your HUD, which is somewhat annoying. So making sure you're carrying around 5 or 6 disease cures or antibiotics, or a combination of both, anytime you possibly can, is handy. The Farmer perk under the luck tree will be very, very handy for making sure you've got disease cures. It seems to be a regular spawn in either chem boxes or first aid boxes as a result of that particular perk proccing. So very, very useful to make sure you've got that one on as well. Tip number 7, where should you go first? Well, I would strongly recommend, particularly if you're talking new characters, which I imagine you are at this point, following the Overseer's main story. There's a number of reasons for that. If you're returning to the game or you've not played the game before, the main story from the original game that now intertwines somewhat with the Wastelanders story will teach you a lot of the basic mechanics. It will show you where to find some of the things you need to survive and how to use things like the camp system, that sort of thing. It's a very, very handy place to start. It's kind of a tutorial that's built into the story. It worked quite well. Just outside the vault, you'll meet Lacey and her friend, who are just down the stairs towards the left as you head out of the vault, and they will point you in the direction of the Wayward. So if you head down the hill and follow the road round past Gilman Lumber, which is a great place to grab some wood for building your camp with, and you'll also need it for cooking, so make sure you've got a supply of that. So on the way down the hill, you might as well. You'll see Wixon Homestead on the right, useful to pick up a little bit more in the way of guns and armour to get you on the way moving into the game. Very, very handy. Do watch out for the Scorched hanging around there though. And you'll make your way down to the bridge where you will find the Wayward. So apart from the fact you can grab some corn out front, you can head inside and meet Duchess and Mort. And Mort has a number of holotapes that will teach you the basics of building a camp and surviving in Fallout 76. Formerly, the main quest used to do this, and you'd get it via the Overseer, which this kind of overwrites that, it changes it. It's not uncommon with extended life on online games for things like this to change as updates are released, so it's something to bear in mind. It does kind of change it a bit from the way it used to be. But grab the holotapes off Mort and work through those. They'll teach you how to build a camp. Duchess's early quest will show you a little bit of how to do that as well. It's also worth noting that if you want to jump into the Wastelanders storyline, you will need to have hit a couple of milestones in the original main story first. If you haven't hit them, you won't be able to progress with the main Wastelanders quest. The Wayward quest line that you pick up from Duchess, that you will be able to do just fine. But for the main story, there's a couple of things you need to hit. That being level 20 before the main story will open up. So if you haven't hit that level, you won't be able to start the main Wastelanders quest. To be fair, it doesn't take all that long. What takes slightly longer is another couple of milestones you need to hit to progress. First one of those is you need to have inoculated yourself against the Scorched Plague. I'm not going to give you any spoilers there or too many details, but as you work through the main story and follow the Overseer's path, you'll get directions at the Wayward towards the Overseer's camp, and that will send you off in the right direction. A couple of holotapes to give you a bit more information. Work your way through that, and you'll eventually find yourself getting inoculated against the Scorched Plague. So the last thing you want is to become scorched. Once you've done that and hit level 20, you will be able to open up the Wastelanders quest line. However, it's also worth pushing on a little bit further, doing a couple more bits and pieces just beyond the inoculation, that will introduce you to a character called Rose. Not spoiling anything, but if you haven't met her, you will also not be able to progress in the main Wastelanders story. Or rather, you'll have to stop, go and do her stuff, and then progress with the story. So these are a few things you need to hit before you can progress with that Wastelanders story. It doesn't stop you interacting with NPCs, and in fact there are more NPCs to interact with in the original main story than there were obviously in the past, so a lot more life around that particular quest line. But these are important things to do to get your game underway and progress with the story. So I would strongly recommend doing those things first. So tip number 8 has to do with your camp, as does number 9. So one of the things you're going to need, and you're going to be using a lot at your camp and in the game in general, is workbenches. The simplest way to get the plans for these, you will start out with a couple of them. The cooking station and weapons and armor benches you will just know from the minute you leave the vault. There's a few other workbenches you want to pick up as well. The easiest place to do that is just to progress through the main story, as I said in the last point, and keep an eye out anytime you come across one of these workbenches. Particularly the chemistry benches, Tinker's workbench, you will tend to have a copy of the plan to build it somewhere nearby. You'll often find players pick them up, so they might not be there when you actually get to them, but just keep plodding on, keep an eye out anytime you come across a workbench. Before too long, probably by the time you hit Morgantown to be honest, if not by the time you leave, then you should have the plans to build all the workbenches necessary at your camp. You will also get a number of plans as you progress through the main story just as quest rewards, and if you want a few more specific ones, you can head to any of the public workshops where you'll be able to complete the various quests attached to those, and those will reward you with plans. And if you want generator plans, the easiest way to get those is to head to any of the power stations, either Poseidon Energy, Monongah Power, or Thunder Mountain, and complete the powering up quest that you get on arrival there. When you complete that, that will reward you with plans for the various generators. So, tip number 9 that follows on quite naturally from that has to do with your camp. They are very, very handy things to have. It basically operates as your own mobile base in the wasteland. It's a place you can head back to reset, store your gear. You'll need to be using a stash because there's only so much you can carry around on your back. The stash used to be very, very limited. It's not so much anymore. You can build one. You've got about 800 pounds of storage in there. So we'll get onto some inventory management in a bit, because you will need to bear in mind picking up literally everything and hoarding it is not going to work for you. You're going to run out of space quickly that way. So a certain amount of inventory management is necessary to stop yourself being utterly over-encumbered and unable to carry or store anything. So we'll jump to that in just a moment. But a lot of people are not really into building. Some of us very much are. if you are into the building side of things, take a little look around the channel. I've got a lot of tips, tricks, a few guides that should give you a little bit of inspiration for any builds you might want to try yourself. So do take a look at those. It should be marked on a card in the top right corner of the video, somewhere around about now. But if you're wanting something that is quick, easy to move, and easy to build, there's a couple of little builds that I'm just going to show you now. It took me less than 10 minutes to build both of these, so obviously you may want to decorate a little bit more, put a bit more furniture inside these builds, but they are quick, easy options to build if you don't want to be building big detailed camps all the time. A couple of key points. In order to move your camp, you'll have to blueprint it. If you have anything other than foundations that clip through the ground, you're going to have a hard time doing that. So the key point is to make sure your camp build doesn't have any stairs leading into it when you blueprint it, and don't blueprint any crops or any outbuildings, anything like that, any water purifiers, that sort of thing. Just build those independently afterwards. When you move your camp, they'll automatically be stored, so you won't need extra resources to build them. You'll just be able to place them down again. It adds a little bit to the time, but it will make your blueprinting process go a lot easier. So, two main builds that I'm demonstrating here. The core one that you'll see a lot of people doing is a single foundation with a staircase running up from it, and then a house just attached to the top of that. This is a dead simple, square little building. Shove some furniture in there, make sure you've got your workbenches. Dead easy. There is a very mobile camp for you. When you're ready to blueprint, you just press tab on the PC. I'm not sure what the control is on console, but there'll be a button that just lets you go to edit mode. From there, you just hold to blueprint, and there should be a button that says select all or blueprint all. Pick that one. Everything will be selected for your blueprint, everything inside the building as well, all your furniture. Then you just give it a name, save it, and you can simply replace it. Worthwhile piece of advice, look for a reasonably flat bit of ground if you want to replace your camp. It just makes life a bit easier. The first build, you've got a bit more flexibility because there's only the one foundation. But with this second one, it's a little bit more interesting. The structure is slightly more interesting than just a floating house on a staircase. But as long as you haven't put any stairs on it, it will be very, very easy to place. You just need a slightly larger bit of flat ground. It's not a serious problem. The thing's only 3 foundations wide anyway, so you don't need that much room. And it's a little bit more interesting. It's fairly compact inside, but there should be plenty of space if you do want to build something a little bit more creative. And as I say, once you place that back down, you can just quite easily drop a few crops in, drop a couple of water purifiers, hook up your generator, make sure you've got everything running. Jobs are good. Simple as that. So, I did say we were going to have a look at inventory management. So in your camp, you'll have a stash box. It's also accessible at any train station or anybody else's camp. You'll always access your own stash directly from any other stash box. So wherever you are in the world, you shouldn't be too far away from the option to store some junk or gear or whatever you might want to store. However, we do have a limited budget on that. There is only £800 worth of storage in your stash, and depending on how much strength your character has and how many pocketed mods and so on your armor, and how good your power armor is, you may also have a limited amount of carry weight on your person as well. So although it won't be too much of an issue in the early game, by the time you get to sort of level 20 onwards or so, you're going to start running into issues storing everything you want to carry. So you're going to have to start being a little bit more merciless about what you pick up. So key points would be, only pick up ammo for guns that you've actually got and you need. You don't really want to be storing 100,000 bullets for something that you're never going to shoot, because it just takes up space, it does have weight, and as you can't sell ammunition, you'll just find you've got a big stock that is of absolutely no use to you. So don't pick it up if you don't need it. If you are going to do that, maybe sell it via the player vending system. That's something you can build in your camp. It will allow you to sell to other players. It'll also mark your camp on your map for other players to come and visit. So you can sell things that way. It's a very effective way of clearing out your stash, so long as you don't overprice things. A lot of people do. Personally, I think with things like ammunition and plans as well, because although you might be struggling for them in the early game, by the time you hit the mid-game, you'll have duplicates coming out of your ears. You can either chuck them on the floor, or the best option is just to put them in your player vending and sell them cheap. Make it very, very cheap, and then people will just run along. You get a couple of caps for it, and it clears out your stash box, which is very, very handy. When it comes to junk items, you're going to find you end up building up a supply that is much larger than you actually need. Less so if you're moving a lot and building camps a lot, but for other items that you don't use quite so much of, you will find you've got more than you really need. So good option there is to head over to your Tinker's Bench and have a look for the bulk item option. And you'll need a certain amount of plastic to do this. It's a resource you do need to bulk items. But press them down, it tidies up your stash box. Doesn't actually reduce the weight with 1 or 2 exceptions, but it keeps things tidy. And it also means you can then take them to vendors around the world and sell bulked junk for caps. Another option that I often go with is to sell it relatively cheap in your own player vending at your camp. You'll find people a lot of the time are running out of things, and if you're selling cheap, they'll be happy to pick up an absolute ton of stuff from you. So it's a good way to make a few caps and clear out your inventory, make a little bit more space. Bear in mind, anything you are selling at your camp will have to be stored in your stash box as well, so that does affect the amount of room you've got to store other items. But if you're selling them at an appropriate price, they should shift reasonably quickly. You should be able to make a good few caps. So that will help you out a great deal. A couple of other pointers are good to know. If you've picked up any weapons that you're not using, you can scrap them at workbenches to get plans. But if you're not using them, take them over to a robot vendor at a train station or any of the new vendors that have come along with Wastelanders. Sell them for caps, get rid of them. They're just going to take up space if you're not using them. The caps are far more useful. They don't weigh anything, don't take up any more space. So definitely the way to go with that. Beyond that, if it's not a weapon you're going to use and you're not desperately short on caps, probably don't pick it up at all. It's mostly going to be unhelpful to you. You can use the scrapper perk, which will help you break them down for more valuable resources, but it does require you to lug these guns around until you find a workbench. And as I say, if you're following the previous tips, you shouldn't be desperately short on necessary scrap materials anyway. So probably not really all that worthwhile. Legendary items. As the game goes on, you'll pick up more and more legendary weapons and armor. You'll outgrow a lot of them quite quickly, particularly towards the later part of your build, past level 50 or so. You're going to be wanting to work towards 3-star legendaries with a good set of effects that are useful to you. If you acquire legendary gear that is not particularly useful to you, take a look at the attributes on there, see whether or not they complement each other, make sure it's a high-level weapon or piece of armor, and make sure it's got 3 legendary attributes on it. And if it has, and it's quite good, stick it in your stash, sell it at your camp for a respectably high number of caps. These things do sell quite well, so that's worth doing. On the other hand, if it's not particularly useful, it's a low level, it's only got 1 star on it, it doesn't have a particularly good combination of legendary attributes, something like that, head over to a train station. You'll see on the platform usually there is a big yellow and red and blue vending machine basically on the side that is there for you to turn in any legendary gear you don't need, and it will repay you in legendary scrip. That legendary scrip will build up, and once you've got enough of it, you can head over to the Rusty Pick in the ash heap and meet the purveyor. She will sell you random legendary items. Most of the time you can pick either a 1-star, 2-star or a 3-star, whichever you like. 3-star is probably the way to go, obviously the most expensive though. And you can choose whether you want a ranged weapon, a melee weapon, or a piece of armor. Head over there, pay your script cost that you have to generate by turning in legendary items that you don't want, and you'll be able to get a random roll that is one of those items at whatever star rating you have picked. So, worth doing over time, and again, if you get something that isn't worth having, you probably will most of the time, run around the corner, turn it in for script. The other option, of course, is if it's something that is good and you can't use it, again, take it back to your camp, stick it in your vending machine, sell it to somebody who can. So one final tip on this point is that back in the Fallout 4 days, it was quite common and popular to collect as much power armor as you can and display it in your camp. With Fallout 76, I strongly advise against doing that. Any power armor pieces you've got will weigh less and take up less room if they're on a power armor frame. It always weighs 10 pounds if it's on a frame. If it's separate, it'll weigh a lot more. That's something to bear in mind. But you won't really need maybe more than 1 or 2 suits of power armor for different jobs. If you carry more than that, you're going to find rapidly it's chunks of 10 taken off your stash limit or your personal carry weight. So it does build up and it won't really benefit you. If you want to change the look of your power armor, you can do that easily enough at a power armor station. So 1 or 2 suits of power armor should be more than enough for you. If you do want to carry more, go ahead. But as I say, it will take up room. It's something to bear in mind if you want to manage your inventory reasonably well. So if you follow all of those tips, make sure you're not carrying too much stuff, keep it neat and tidy. You should be able to cope just fine with the stash limit of £800 and with your personal inventory limits. I've been managing just fine since they upped the stash limit, so hopefully this should work for you guys as well. So a couple of bonus tips that I did want to include in the main ones that you may want to consider as you head through Fallout 76 and journey around the wasteland. You want a little bit of extra carrying weight? Get yourself a backpack. When you get to Morgantown Airport, you'll find the plans in a stash box at the end of your little run through that dungeon that will allow you to build a small backpack. If you want a larger one with some extra features available, you can join the Pioneer Scouts over at the Pioneer Scout Camp at the bottom end of the Toxic Valley. Go and talk to Scout Leader Jaggy, and he'll set you off on a series of quests. You'll need to complete those quests, pass a few exams at the terminal inside the building just near where Jaggy's hanging out, and you'll be able to then get yourself a larger backpack. If you're looking to find out where all the challenges are in order to get the tadpole badges and later on the possum badges so you can upgrade your backpack, have a look in your challenges menu on the world map. Inside that menu you will find, under the world challenges, a number of challenges listed tadpole, and later on, once you've got your backpack, possum as well. And complete those, you'll get Scout badges, which you can then turn in at the Pioneer Scout Camp to get your backpacks and upgrades for it, and a number of other Pioneer Scouts themed skins for various items, things like that. It's quite a time-consuming process, it's quite a lot to achieve, but, as I say, a couple of useful bits and pieces. So if you're into photography, Fallout 76's photo mode is great fun, you can get some amazing shots, but if you're in the middle of combat and you're being run at by a creature that you want to photograph, it's not good fun to try and get through menus in order to do that while it's chewing on you. So, one thing you can do to get around that is pick up a practical camera. It's a camera that operates much the same way as a gun does. You aim it the same way, and when you fire it, it fires the shutter. It's a very handy way to take pictures. It works the same way as photo mode. They'll still appear in your loading screens, so that's always cool. And you get a little bit more information about what you're looking at as well, which is a handy little feature. If you want to do that, you can head to certain locations. A couple of useful ones are Colonel Kelly Monument in the Toxic Valley, Wavy Willard's Water Park, also in the Toxic Valley, and Camden Park, which is a fairground down at the bottom end of the forest region on the border with the Ash Heap. Those are 3 easy locations, and you need to look for a dead tourist. You may have to server hop in order to get them to spawn. Personally, I recommend picking a location. I like the Colonel Kelly Monument because it's the smallest location there and it makes the body easiest to find. And then see if you find it. If you don't, log out, log back in, and see if it spawns that time for you. Do that a few times and you'll pick up a camera off the corpse and a quest to go and take pictures of a few locations, which will then allow you to build some upgrades for your camera. You can also do some daily quests for a currently unnamed, shall we say, character in Wastelanders that will allow you to get some extra upgrades for your camera as well. So, if you want to know where to get the power armor station for your camp, that's one of the hardest workbenches to get hold of. You will need to be level 25 because it requires you to build the Excavator power armor. Can't do that under level 25. Head over to Garahan Mining Headquarters, it's at the bottom of the Ash Heap, just on the border with the Savage Divide there, and you will see a little sign out front. You can also pick it up in a couple of other locations, but this is the easiest way of doing it. Looking at that sign will give you a quest to make Excavator power armor. As I say, you are required to be level 25 minimum in order to do that, and if you can't build it, you won't be able to get the power armor station plans either, because that is a quest reward at the end of this particular line. But head on into the building, head downstairs, you'll find out all the details on the Excavator power armor. Build yourself a set of power armor. Head downstairs again to a little terminal in the bottom room with all the power armor stations in it. Activate that and register your power armor. You'll need to be wearing it at the time. And once you register it, it'll complete the quest and give you the plans for the power armor station workbench. With Wastelanders, if you're struggling with some of the special checks in dialogue, useful technique is just to step back out of the conversation. You can do that quick and easy at any time and rejoin the conversation. It doesn't affect it. And from there you can just pop some chems. So alcohol and chems will give you stat boosts. They'll also generally pull down other stats, so it's something to bear in mind. For example, buff out will increase your strength. Alcohol will usually increase your strength or possibly your charisma for a little while. And mentats will increase your intelligence. And of course there are countless others besides that will have varying effects. So if you take some of those, it'll boost up your stat ability and you'll be able to pass special checks that you might not otherwise be able to pass. On top of that, if you're using, I believe it is Unyielding Armour, with the legendary effect Unyielding on it, it will give you a boost to your special abilities. So that does affect your checks in dialogue, another little way of boosting your abilities to get through those checks. Useful tip if you're after good legendary gear is to hoard your legendary script. We said before, turn in the legendaries you don't want at train stations at the script machines. Collect your script and keep an eye out on the Twitter and Facebook and Instagram pages for Fallout. because on regular occasions you'll find the player hosts a sale at a shop that knocks 25% usually off the cost of any legendary items you buy. Being as there's a limit to how much script you can carry, and these things are not particularly cheap, you'll find that if you're patient and a little bit lucky, the reduced cost of the various items you buy is an advantage well worth having. It gives you a few extra opportunities to roll and a better chance of picking up some better gear. Still a little bit of RNG in there, but it's a helpful way of maximising the value of your legendary script. It does happen fairly regularly, at least once a month usually, so that's something you should definitely keep an eye out for. You'll also find the news page that pops up when you first log into Fallout 76 will also tell you if there's a sale going on as well. Another way of doing it, of course, is to hop around other players' camps and have a look at their player vending. People are often selling very, very cool bits of gear. As I said before, it's a good way of making a few caps. Good way of finding decent gear. Sometimes things are ridiculously overpriced, so bear that in mind. It's not always worth paying the big bucks for it unless you've got the caps to burn, but you can often get some absolute gems at reasonable prices if you just hop around a few player camps. So, well worth doing. If you are looking for a little XP boost, the easy way of doing that is to head up to Armour Homestead, which is the northern part of the forest region. Head down the bottom to the fields just below the main farm, and you'll find a load of cranberries. Watch out for the bloatflies and bloodbugs hanging around in the area. They're mildly annoying. But grab the cranberries from the field, head back up the hill to the little cooking station, and you can cook up cranberry cobbler. That will give you a little 5%, I believe, boost to your XP gain for a period of time. I think it's about 2 hours or so. You can keep that topped up. You can see the stat in your Pip-Boy if you would like to see how much time you've got left before that runs out. Dead easy way of giving yourself a little XP boost if you want. Another way of doing that is to head down to the Cranberry Bog if you're a high enough level already, and you can grab diseased cranberries from just about anywhere in the Cranberry Bog. If you head over to a crafting bench or a cooking station, here's one in my camp, you can turn that into cranberry juice. So regular cranberries become cranberry cobbler, diseased cranberries become cranberry juice that only give you 2% boost, but another handy point, those two abilities do stack, so you can boost it up to 7% that way. You can also make a cranberry relish, which involves using gourds, I believe. I haven't actually got the recipe to hand, but that will also stack with the other abilities and give you a little boost to your XP as well. And one last useful point, particularly if you're on PC, but I should imagine it works if you're on console as well. If you're struggling a little bit with your frame rates, 76 is not the best optimized game in the world. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. If you head into your settings, go over to display settings and find the shadow draw distance. This is something that will have very little impact on your game's look. You won't really notice a big graphical change from it, but if you drop it down to medium or low, it will give you an FPS boost. It's a dead simple way of giving a little boost. Even on my overkill PC, there are serious limits to the frame rates I'm able to get, which is unfortunate, but this does help quite considerably, so worth trying out. And as I said earlier, if you want to know where to get various items for crafting, I'm going to be doing a series of resource guides very, very soon. So do watch out for that. You might want to pin the playlist that will be coming up with that. And it'll be a dead easy resource to hop in and find a good place to gather whatever crafting resource you need. So do keep an eye out for that over the coming days and weeks. So there we go. A few useful tips to give you a good strong start in Fallout 76 with Wastelanders. Do hope you guys enjoy the game. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did find it useful, please do drop a like or a sub. It's very, very much appreciated. As always, social media links down in the description if you want to catch up with me on Twitter, Instagram or Facebook. And if you've hit the notification bell, you'll be able to catch one of the live streams as well. You'll be getting notified every time I go live, which I'm doing very regularly at the moment. We're playing a lot of Fallout 76 and a few other cool bits and pieces on the side as well, so do watch out for those. And if you're really enjoying the content, please do consider becoming a channel member via the blue join button below. You'll find all the information down in the description as well. The support is humongously appreciated. Thank you very much to everybody who's already done that. For now, I'll say thank you very much for watching, and I look forward to speaking to you all very, very soon.